Well, my name is Mary Lee Malaby, and I'm 76 years old, and I was born in Tucson. On my mother's side, I'm 5th generation. On my dad's side, I'm 1st generation.
Do you remember anything about your grandparents?
My grandfather, Lee Goon, came to this country in 1905, and I have the title where he bought the property there in South Tucson, 1600 South 9th. And well, the store was being built, and then he started the business there in 1912, because my dad recorded some records that we have where he started the business in 1912. And we stayed there at the store until 1944. My father came from China in 1926, and he was at the store there working with my grandfather. And of course, then after I was born, I went to work at the store. We lived in the back of the store like most Chinese families lived, because we did everything in the store. My father used to roast coffee. He used to sell kerosene. He used to sell bales of hay, and we used to raise our own bean sprout in the back of the store, ironically. But we were always very busy, so everybody worked. My dad worked 22 hours a day most of the time because he had to cut meat with a handsaw. So that's why we have that coat with his name on it. And then he would cook suet, kidney suet. And he would chew on kidney suet. I don't know why. My mother says, that is nothing but fat. He says, that gives me the strength. My father weighed 98 pounds and 5 feet tall, so he needed the strength, I think, through eating suet. The first thing my father taught me at the store was how to greet the customers when they come into our place of business. We had a black gentleman who sold wood a block from our store. Excuse me. And his name was Mr. Block. So he said, Mary, he says, all the customers have to be greeted enthusiastically. He says, I don't care if it's Mr. Block from down the street or the President of the United States. They will get the same enthusiastic greeting, because the nickel from Mr. Block and the nickel from the President is worth the same amount on our till. So he was philosophical that way, you know, and everybody was treated the same.
Can you tell us how the grocery store opened?
I don't remember when they opened it, because I guess it was way before I was born. But he put it in my father's name, ironically, because my father was Lee Goon. But the bank account was in Lee Hop and Lee Goon. There was 2 bank accounts. And I'll tell you a little story about that Lee Hop and Lee Goon. When I was working at the post office in the 70s, I guess, I went to have my glasses adjusted, and the optometrist says, do you know this chink here? And he said, who is she? He says, Lee Hop's daughter. And he said, oh, Lee Hop, he must be 100 years old. I said, no. I said, my father's not 100 years old. He says, well, I worked at the bank, and in those days, Southern Arizona Bank would make out the deposit slips for the customers. So he said, well, we never knew what this Chinaman's name was, because he'd take money out of one pocket. He said, Lee Goon, Lee Hop, Lee Goon, and Lee Hop. So we never knew what his name was, but the store was in my father's name. And I have the little book when he used to make the deposits in Lee Hop, but that was before my father came to this country. That was in 1922. And that's what that little bank bag, I have the old bank bag that belonged to my grandfather, Lee Goon, and the little deposit where he deposited it to the savings account.
Now, back in '79, your family was featured in a Sunset magazine for something quite peculiar, Peking turkey. Can you explain what that is and how your father made it?
He used to call it Peking turkey because he used to use Chinese spices to cook it. And what happened is that my husband and I were on a tour of the Copper Canyon. down in Chihuahua, Mexico. And Mary Ann Reese and Norman Plate. Norman Plate was a photographer. Mary Ann Reese was one of the editors of the Sunset magazine, were on the tour. And somebody told Mary Ann Reese that my father cooked the best turkey in the world. And it was like 3 or 4 days before Thanksgiving. So Mary Ann Reese came to me and says, Mary, could we invite ourselves to your dad's Thanksgiving dinner? And I said, sure. I says, I'll just tell him that you're coming. So I told him, Papa, I says, the people from Sunset Magazine would like to come and have Thanksgiving turkey with us. Is that all right? And his response always was, it's only a little handful of rice. In other words, everybody was welcome because it would only take a little handful of rice. After dinner, they said, we have never tasted turkey like this. So he says, what kind of turkey is it, Mr. Lee? He says, it's Peking turkey. So this was in November. The following May, they came and bought everything, all the ingredients for my dad to make it, to feature it in Sunset Magazine for the November issue of '79. And that's how it come to be that he called it Peking turkey, because he mixed spices, Chinese spices, and you know, to this day we still cook turkey like that.
All right, so your father used to loan out money to people.
Yeah.
And he loaned out money to a certain police officer. Can you tell us what happened?
I don't know if he was a detective, police, sheriff. I don't know. I know he was law enforcement, and his name was Chet Sherman. And Chet Sherman was one of the people that that caught John Dillinger when he was apprehended here in Tucson. So after he got him, they took some guns away from John Dillinger, so he took the guns over to my dad's store and says, here, Lee, he says, keep these guns for safekeeping until he goes on trial. So my dad kept the guns for John Dillinger at the store. But Chet Sherman used to use my father, too, because I found records where, you know, all these people would borrow money. My father would very methodically write when they borrowed the money and when they paid it. And then he borrowed money and never paid his bill, so, you know. But if my father needed a favor, I guess that was a way of doing the favor, so that maybe that's why he was able to buy property on Tucson Boulevard, on Speedway, when nobody else could. He was very, very protective of the Chinese community. During the war, 1944-45, we had to have ration stamps to buy food, pineapple, coffee, sugar, and all that stuff, gasoline, nylon hose, and you had to have your book of stamps. I still have my book of stamps from 1945. And of course, the meat companies also, you know, they didn't sell to everybody. So Swift and Company was very popular here. And my dad says, I want 50 cases of lard, because we lived in the South Side and a lot of people made tortillas. And the salesman says, we don't have any lard. So my father called his relative, Lee Ho, and said, did you buy any lard from Swift? He said, yeah. And he says, just this week? And he said, yes. So he said, okay. Swift wouldn't sell it to me. We're going to boycott him. I don't want any Chinese stores to buy from Swift anymore. And they listened to my dad. They bought everything from Peyton Packing. They boycotted him because they wouldn't sell. And he says, you're not selling to any more Chinese stores. Of course, that's all there was here in Tucson, Chinese stores. But I always thought of my dad as very humble. But he wasn't very humble. He didn't take too much guff from anybody.